Welcome back, everybody, to the channel. You may be wondering why am I holding this up instead of clipping it? Well, I'm in the process of updating some of the gear and some of the things that I use, and I'm having trouble clipping this thing on. So as I wait for the new gear to come in, so I don't have to be dangling anything over here or holding this up, I'm just gonna pretend I'm interviewing myself because this is what's going on here. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. My name is Steven De Los Rios. Thank you for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're returning, well, welcome back. I wanted to actually take a little bit of time to talk about a couple of reasons why I don't like movies all that much anymore these days. Now, let me preface it. I do love movies, especially those from times past, but I wanted to comment on three specific different points and really critiques that I have. A lot of people that I know personally say to me that they don't really like watching movies with me because I tend to be very critical. Now, I get that. I totally do. In fact, I've learned over the years that maybe there's some criticism I got to keep to myself, but there are three really big points that I think need to be talked about, because not only are they really important whenever you go and watch a movie and you want to take the director, you want to take the film seriously, but I think there are 3 points that in general talk a lot about art, and especially the art we're seeing nowadays. And with the rise of AI art and a lot of artificial things that are coming up, imitations, copycats, it's really nice to be able to take these 3 points that I'm going to take and really just think about. So really the first thing that I have against movies nowadays is that I'm not too convinced. There are a lot of movies that are, they sell the point as far as graphics go, and visually it's super appealing. It's a visual buffet for sure. So I'm not discrediting the use of technology and how far we've come. What I'm not convinced of anymore, or rarely, is the rules set up in the world of the movie. When I go into the theater, I want to drown out the exterior world. I want to forget about whatever's going on outside the movie theater, and I want to focus in on the world that I'm watching in the screen in front of me. That means there are certain rules and parameters that the directors and the staff and everybody who produced the film put together, and they are setting the stage for the world that you're about to watch. Now, whenever you watch a movie, you expect the rules that are set to be followed by the people on screen. I'm a big fan of whenever the character in a movie has to deal with the consequences of his or her actions. So they can't act a certain way, wink and nod at the audience, and then get away with not having to deal with the consequences. And the reason I like that is because that's exactly what happens in the real world. We don't get off scot-free doing something that we should not be doing and then not have to deal with the consequences. And I guess to contrast Marvel, because Marvel does this a whole lot. They'll act a certain way, they'll introduce a certain kind of set of rules and maybe abilities that go along with the character, and you know that, okay, these traits belong to this character, they have to abide by these rules, they can't do this. Then later on down the road in the same movie, whenever it's convenient to maybe forget about those rules that were set up before, it happens, and there's not much consistency. A great contrasting movie for me is DC. Now, I know that I am in the minority, I totally get it, I'll own it. But something about, especially the more recent DC movies like the Zack Snyder movies where Superman Returns or Batman vs. Superman, again, I know that it's not the most popular movies, but those movies are basically confining the characters to their world, and they have to deal with the consequences. Like, for example, at the end of Superman Returns, Superman is fighting General Zod and just destroying a city. In the beginning of Batman vs. Superman, the sequel to Superman Returns, you see Bruce Wayne looking up into the sky and seeing Superman fighting Zod, and then immediately coming back down to Earth, Bruce Wayne is looking at the destruction with his building just coming down on them, and really that whole movie is a reaction to, you can't really just play God and expect to get away with all the destruction you may leave behind. You've got to be mindful of the human life around you. And that would lead me more to my second point, which is that characters are not allowed to properly develop. And the reason that we, maybe 10, 15 years ago, we really loved these superhero films that were coming out was because when they acted a certain way and negative consequence came of that, they had to wrestle with the decision of, should I keep going down this path? Should I acknowledge the wrong that I did and turn around and keep doing something better in order to right those wrongs? Or do I really enjoy doing the bad that I just committed? And so there was an internal dialogue and even external at many points of these films, back in the day, that allowed the audience to be able to resonate, even though we didn't have web coming out of our hands, or we couldn't fly. Even though we couldn't physically resonate with these characters and the abilities that they had, morally we could, because we could then take stock of our own life and think, okay, this character is making me feel like there's something wrong that he did, and maybe I gotta really figure out what right and wrong is, and then take that back home and then think about, how is this applicable in my life? Is there something going on in my life that maybe I should be doing differently, or I didn't like the way that turned out, and so I should think about how to right that, or in the future not do that again. Allowing characters to live within their world and wrestle with the consequences of their world allows the audience to be able to take those morals back home, if they were even relevant at all. Now, you will get a lot of films where the character never really learned the lesson, and yeah, we'll call those tragic characters or tragic heroes, but it still allowed the audience to see on paper, this is the character, this is what's going on, there are still consequences to that and repercussions in their world. But now it allows the audience to still reflect, even though the character themselves may not fully develop or may not acknowledge or decide to be better moving forward, which then further allowed for substance. Instead of these 2D characters we're seeing nowadays where they're just reacting. And again, you can do whatever you want if you make a film, but people want to see characters that have more dimension, have more substance, and can actually react or take stock of what's going on and develop. Most of the characters nowadays that I'm seeing especially are just so 2D in character dimension. Which then naturally leads to the third point. I'm very critical about movies because I believe that movies, films, cinematography, it's all art. I think most of you would agree when I say that art is good and art can be bad. You may not like it, but art ultimately reflects the ideas of a generation, of a culture. You go back 10, 15, 30, 100 years, 1,000 years. Look at their art, their plays, their modes of expression. They all expressed ideas, wishful thinking at their time, whatever it may be. They all expressed ideas at the time that the current generation was wanting to experience, wrestling with. I've watched films that I just did not like, but there are some films that I would consider bad art, but are fair, and I would watch again only because the directors, whoever was putting the ideas together behind the scenes and putting them on screen, was laying out a set of values. They were being true to them, but throughout the development of the character and the storyline, maybe giving reasons for why their view should be more acknowledged, or why their view may be superior to another view. They were never really trying to extract emotive responses from people, but they were just consistent and remained fair throughout the entire film, even if I personally did not agree with the morals of the director, the character, whatever they decided to set up. So film is art. Whenever you remain as objective as possible, state your view in the character development, in the storyline, the tragedy, state the view, and then remain consistent with it, giving as much evidence, because that's really, at the end of the day, that's what art does. Art says something about the world. I know a lot of people say art is subjective, and I understand to an extent like what they mean by that, but art in all its forms throughout all of history, art has always said something about the culture, about the generation, about the views that the people had in their day. Whether they were good or bad, art always said something. And in the end, I would say good art, meaning art that is true to the message, the director or the artist. True art that remains true to the message that the artist is trying to say and is consistent throughout the entire length of the film, in this case, will sell you a point, will try and convince you of a moral, a point. Will do it through a form of entertainment, but will remain consistent and will give you something to think about. And who knows, it may change your mind on a particular subject, a form of thinking. But that is why nowadays I'm very critical of movies, is that there's no consistency in filmmaking. The graphics are great. In fact, I might even say that the graphics are so great, it's even more disappointing and distracting when a filmmaker such as Marvel creates movies as of recently that are just so subpar, but they slap the Marvel logo on there and expect everybody just to flock to the movie theaters, all the while the message is just declining. But that's why I'm particularly not fond of new movies and why I have thoroughly been disappointed. I've slowed down a little bit in releasing weekly videos consistently, only because I'm in the process of adjusting some things and technology-wise, and just kind of learning some new editing software. So that's gonna be great because I'm gonna be able to bring a much better product to you. I'm also learning a whole lot. If you notice something that maybe could be worked on a little bit, let me know in the comments. I really take all of your feedback and sincerely appreciate it. But on that note, please like this video. It helps support the channel. I can't wait to see you guys in the next video.